about it, and I really enjoyed just when I was looking at your resume. I feel like we like the same kind of shows. Like you've also worked on shows that I feel are very distinct from each other and have a
Mm.
very specific look and are very exploratory and imaginative, which has been the real joy of
Yeah.
working on Yellowjackets. It's such a beautifully open-ended creative show to work on.
Yeah. It's funny because you like I see procedural and you know and I'm like, God, I do not want to do like medical. I don't want to do police offices. I feel like I've been very lucky of like, it's offices, but it's quirky enough that it's different. It's like, so I hear what you're saying, like something a little different, a little not of the ordinary to design and decorate, I think is always my goal.
It's a great opportunity, and I feel like leaning into the nature of what that is.
Yeah.
I always feel like if the realism is there, even if it's another time, another planet,
Yeah.
another dimension, like still having its own realism and its sense of, artistic kind of cohesiveness is a really fun goal for these projects too.
Were you on the show from the beginning?
No, I joined in season two.
Season two. Yeah, that's what I thought. I didn't know if maybe you came in a little season one or not, but
Yeah.
I I love this show. I'm a fan of this show, so it's extra special to me when I talk to people who I'm a fan of the shows because I dork out a little. So sorry about that, but
Oh, totally understand. I was a fan of the show when I got hired, which was just the most fabulous feeling. And I
yeah,
also
oh
the
yeah,
cast would mention that as well. They were already fans of the show, and then they got brought on. And there's a kind of pinching yourself that goes on for a few months until you're like, am I actually
yeah.
standing in the set and we're
Yeah.
changing and we're doing, the cabin on stage and all of that. So it's a really wonderful feeling.
Two, you get to because I think too, I know what's happening. I know what the scripts are. I know what the story
Yeah.
is. Like,
Yeah,
oh
you're
my
kind of like,
God,
yeah, oh, you remember that. And you weren't
yeah.
there, but you're like, yeah, I remember that part.
Yeah, it's like when you're a fan of the show you work on, it's a different level.
Hmm.
I mean, I think, we work and some projects are more to our hearts than others, but it's great when you work on something you really like, I must say.
Hmm. Very fortunate.
When you came into season three, how long was your hiatus from season two?
It was quite long due to the strikes. It was longer than it was intended to be. So we stopped shooting season two in early February of 2023. And then we came back in March of 2024 for
Oh,
prep
wow.
for season three. So it was over a year. And that is, of course, about 6 months, I believe, was added to that gap due to
Wow.
the strikes in Hollywood. Um, in a way, it was. Sometimes there's a fortuitousness to the timing in the sense that we were able to shoot summer for summer and we shot outside
Right.
for the village and all the wilderness beats. So the timing in that sense worked out well. And we had amazing weather. We were very lucky last summer. The weather was clear and perfect and not too hot.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
but in that sense, of course, we were all happy to be back, but also we did benefit from the summer for summer component of it.
Did you did you set out so you set out to design this and shoot this all outdoors, or was there talk of like we should make two of these. We should make one outside and one on the set on the
You
set.
know what's interesting? That's a good point. And we have like a bravery on the part of our production and our DPs because the initial talk was to do sort of what you would expect, which is you're going to build an exterior for the village outdoors and you're going to build some, huts on stage. So we were prepared for that and that we didn't end up doing it. The discussion ultimately became with the DPs and our really brave and fabulous showrunners and so on. Saying, let's just go for real. If it's raining, we're going to figure it out. So there was a lot of exploration in our process. We decided to build everything outside for real. The village was built out of real sticks and real leaves. There's no fake materials to speak of.
Yeah.
And then also the pit, which was an amazing
Oh, yeah.
exploration as well. Frequently when you have a big pit like that and you're in Vancouver and you think, okay, it's going to fill up with water, getting down into it's going to be tricky to film in. It was such a big part of the season with Coach's discovery of it and
Yeah.
Travis's kind of exploration with the weaving the twigs and so on. We ultimately decided just to cut it in the ground, which I just think was the best choice because we built a proper pit in the ground that could get in and shoot. And we
Wow.
had to get a sump pump and all kinds of technical engineering to do it. but it was really the way to go. So we just went for it and pulled off the Band-Aid, and we didn't film much on stage of the 90s timeline. Most of it was out in the real wilderness.
Did you have inspiration for these huts, but then had to change your approach because it was going to be all outside?
It was not so much about the outside part. It was more finding what this village was going to be, as you can imagine, was a process.
Yeah,
And there's, so many ways that you can approach something like this. You can go from dead simplicity and absolute realism. I feel like we tread a fine line between that and a little bit of kind of romanticization and magic of what they could accomplish because our showrunners feel like they want a visual distinctness and a sense of creating a culture that goes with the costumes and the incredible promise of the pilot, what was established of their torches, their costumes. In the pilot, you have that flash forward where you see this culture they developed, and Marie Schley did the costumes for that. She's a genius. So we felt the village needed to represent that same level of craftspersonship where you've used pieces of what you have in your world, and in the costume they've used pieces of the airplane and that sort of, natural fabrics and the
yeah.
same feeling for the village. So we decided that everything in the village had to be salvaged from the burning cabin. So
Hmm.
in the inner narrative of the story, they had managed to salvage a few important things. There's some burnt cups, there's some tools. Also, there were things outside the cabin. There was the meat shack, there was kind of a dressing stand. So we feel like some of those didn't burn or burn as much. So there's a few small pieces of set deck that are cabin salvage. There was also just wilderness. They had found ways with the tools that they had salvaged and through ingenuity to
Yeah.
build increasingly complex structures. We have one that Travis lives in that has kind of a um,
Yeah.
really simple feel to it. It's more like a tree house. That in our mind was the story of the village was that was their first shelter. And then a very interesting conversation came up about how do we show how they learn to build more complex structures? So I have an architecture background originally. So when people wonder who the architecture nerd is in the village that has the book, it's actually me.
Yeah.
So I made a pitch in a meeting, just sort of going, well, if we want to make sure that they can sort of move into similar sort of prehistoric human structures, let's have a book that somebody is 11th or 12th grade architecture and art
Right.
class. So we we made this book for fun that kind of had structures that were very typical early human circular. They're actually quite easy to make. Some of our greens people made these structures very quickly once you get the hang of it. And they're strong people, the Yellowjackets, they're inventive. We're like, you know what? Someone's got a book. So we put this book. One of the fun things about the village was coming up with little ideas for daily dressing. Like they've used the chairs from the airplane and they've used,
Right.
books that they have left over from the cabin, from the airplane, from their luggage. So we made this little sort of book lending library outside of Murray and Akila's hut,
That's
which
so
was really fun. And just to think of what books do they have, and some of them are a little burned. And then so we put the architecture book there, and then Bart, our showrunner, who was also directing the first episode, and it was so fun to work with him on that. He shot it and it made it into the cut. I was like, wow, the book is in the show. We weren't necessarily expecting it to be anything beyond sort of background dressing. So it's fun when you have
oh, that's
Easter
great.
eggs like that. I think it's right there.
Yeah.
Easter eggs like that serve a sort of function to kind of describe the process of what they went through. So using the nature, using resources on Ty Van's hut there, Tyson Van's
Yeah.
hut, you can see a little bit of burnt airplane material, and they've got their like double kind of cozy chairs from the plane. Using that and what's left from the cabin, and that's it. We had to discuss every moment that we came up with discussions like, okay, they've got lanterns. How
Yeah.
did
Our
how did they maybe rescued it? Everything had to be discussed in terms of how they made it.
Well, yeah, because you have super fans and you want the reality of it of what could they possibly do. I really love I love that there's like a feminine feel to it though, like the circular opening of some of the teepees and then like the flowers interwoven into it and it's like girly. Like you've actually made it like in a sense like girly and what they would do. They got the time. So like why not?
That's exactly it. We thought, well, they're going to spend some time crafting,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I was in the feeling that sort of at the beginning of the season with the kind of yellow filter and the warmth of, this is the promise of partly the idea was that we had to explain that some of them may actually want to stay there. Like it'll
Yeah,
get to a point, we had
that's
a note later in the season that your life here's got to be fairly decent to want to consider even staying. So
yeah.
there was that, and then it sort of deteriorates throughout the season. But also this kind of, yeah, this kind of false warmth that then deteriorates when we get later into the season, into the snow and so on. But we wanted to be able to feel a bit pastoral and almost pretty to start. And then later at night, in episode 6, the bonfire, when the frog scientists enter the camp, it needs to feel eerie and spooky. So the sort of spiky shapes and the profiles become a little witchy and spooky
I have this other one.
at night. If you don't know what you're walking into, it could translate from kind of homey to frightening was the plan.
And this, I mean, the night scenes too, and like how the like lighting this, that's a huge discussion of like,
Mhm.
we have enough lights? Can they make these lights? Like, it can't all just be fire, and you want this glow, which I thought was such a great way to, again, make it like a nice feminine little gathering they're having here in their garb, but then giving them this soft light also, which is attainable. Which I think is
Mhm.
like, it's so beautiful that you got that the design of it is so beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, our props department played. Ooh, this was one of our more tricky technical things was the paper lanterns and, would they really float? How are they made? And then they're made out of math textbook pages for
Oh,
fun. 'Cause, you don't really need your math textbook anymore
not
if you're
anymore.
stranded out in the
Not
wilderness,
anymore. No
really.
more algebra for me.
No, no, the girls don't know anything about trigonometry or whatever the phrase was in the pilot. They're just burning it and sending it up into the sky. But yeah, that was a lot. A lot of these pieces like this and the little cups that they carry that are, cans that we figured were burnt from the pantry of the cabin that they've used, pine sap to make, I think it's pine sap. We did a bunch of research about, how do you create light? As there are a few candles that have been salvaged, but beyond that, they're on their own. Um, Lots of research about what would survivalist research
Isn't
really.
it, isn't it amazing? I say it all the time, the amazement of what we research for our jobs that we would never like really deep dive into if we were just regular people, like the
Oh
weirdest
yeah.
things. And yeah, how do I survive in the wilderness? How do I make that fire last years? I mean, or years,
Mhm.
but yeah. And then you do. I mean, we all deep dive into this research and make it as realistic as we can.
And I feel like that's the fun of it too, because I saw
Yeah.
on your resume that you had also studied, real world architecture
Yeah.
prior to going into the film industry. And that is a wonderful profession and very interesting in itself. But I do find the designing to a story that we get to do
Yeah. Yeah.
to a world that's not this world that we
Yeah.
live in. It's its own world building is absolutely fascinating and really irreplaceable as a process. Once you've been in and had the opportunity to do this, it's just such a wonderful, every day I am thankful to get to do this
Me
as a
too.
job.
It's crazy. It's really crazy because I worked like in an architecture firm and everything, and it was like they were designing projects that weren't going to be real for like 2, 3 years. And I was like,
Mhm.
how do you know that this pillow and this tassel is going to be relevant in 3 years? It's a real, I mean, that alone is a whole nother thing of like predicting design and everything. But I was like, you got to wait all this time to see your project? This is crazy. I think that's one
Yeah,
of
the
the things
time
they don't tell you
frames.
in college of like the real process, the real timeline of what you're doing, the real world.
Well, I think that's an interesting conversation too to people that are listening to the podcast that have design backgrounds but are working in other fields than film is I was thinking about the time frames that we accomplish things
Oh,
in
it's
compared
crazy.
to other, we'll build a house in 6 weeks. Like we'll
Yeah.
just build an actual, maybe it doesn't have the vapor barrier, but really short of that, we will build things in remarkably quick time frames in terms of ideas, development, illustrations, and reality, which is part of the fun of it, but it is very much, once you're on that conveyor belt, you're running while you're in
Yeah,
prep
the train
doing
doesn't
it.
stop. The train
Yeah.
is not stopping for anyone except for an actor. If an actor's sick, it may stop. Or,
Yeah.
fires, real devastating fires.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. But short of that, it is
Yeah,
really, it is
we're
a
not
thought.
stopping.
And so for things like this lanterns and so on, it's a lot of very quick meetings and discussions. And sometimes I feel like creatively we do work well together as hive minds, but also in those time frames, it kind of like when you have a good show like this with great, kind showrunners and people are part of this creative hive mind, I feel like that's when a lot of creative
Mhm.
inspiration strikes as well.
Did you have you had like outlines or scripts? Like how were you working like one
Yeah,
to another? Or-
we had a pretty thorough outline from the beginning. We knew that there were certain spoilers that we don't always know, which is probably good. We knew from the beginning that it was going to seem to be idyllic and then deteriorate, which is where the sort of discussion of, for instance, Ben's shelter that you have here to me was the perfect kind of mid-season shift because they had to quickly build this is, and in many ways, this is actually the trickiest set that we designed, his shelter, because I wanted it to feel like it belonged to the technology of the village, but they built it quickly. But it needed to have this kind of poignant, like feel that they were trying to make something for him that had a teeny bit of humanity to it, but is
Mhm.
also kind of like apocalyptic and devastating. So I personally played with these blankets. Our great set deck team put it together and our greens team made it, but it was just this one thing where I really played and we ripped them and made them
Yeah.
feel burnt and
Engaged.
wrapped them around the posts because it just needed to have this very particular hard to kind of achieve frightening yet poignant sadness to it.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
our
Because
DP
there's
got right in there with it too.
because you're giving them this like well they want to take care of them but they don't like there's such a uh balance from these characters of like good and evil, really.
Mhm.
And showing, as you're saying, like showing the humanity through the set dressing is, and it reads very well of like, yeah, they put this together for him. They were going to keep him there. Some people really were going to keep him there.
Yeah, that each of them has like their own conflict. Like he's sort of the peak of so many internal conflicts for them about how far are we going to go? Are
Yeah,
we going to kill him and eat him? Are we going to let him go? Like, can we trust people anymore? I think it really is just the perfect mid-season
yeah.
story stretch where he's on his trial. And we, with Jennifer Morrison, the fantastic director that directed the episode with his trial, we spoke a lot about these triangular shapes
Oh,
too, and how the village kind of has a hierarchy that, Lottie with the circular window, she's at the peak of the village and she can kind of see everybody. Her circular window is a bit of an Easter egg because it plays forward in season 2 in her
hmm,
sharing shack at her compound.
oh,
'Cause she kind of like gives this sense of transparency and spirituality, but is she actually kind of watching people? And of the three sort of proposed leaders, her and Shauna and Natalie, in some ways she kind of moves the dial in a subtle way a lot. So we talked a bit about these triangular shapes and hierarchy, and that she's kind of at the head of the table, as it were, in some ways. And I found for Jennifer's episode, because they spent so much time in the village, it was a very tricky episode. And
hmm,
we have two fabulous DPs, Shasta and Michael. Shasta, they each just, it was so gratifying to see that they were enjoying the shooting the village, and we sort of learned about it as we went. But I found they shot that village really beautifully
yeah. It's a
to
lot of
try to
wides.
capture
They have a lot of
spaces.
wides in it, which is nice.
Yeah. Exactly. And then sort of like focusing a little bit on a detail as well to kind of help the story that, in Travis's hut, say he's made sort of wind chimes out of bones and so on, just like focusing on the little details, those set deck details that tell us the story of how they made it. And like you said, they have time on their hands. They're gonna
Yeah.
craft, they're gonna do some stuff to make it pretty or to do their thing.
Now, when they say to you, okay, and then all of a sudden it's winter time. Well,
Yeah.
I gotta get back to that garden, but because the garden's really pretty. But when they say, all right, now we're gonna slow snow blow it, you're like, okay. I
Yeah.
mean, how beautiful it looks with snow on it. You must have been very happy.
That was really fun. And of course, snow is like really incredibly challenging, artificial
Yeah.
snow.
Yeah.
It's, for those of us that
And nobody wants to
each
breathe it either. Like,
no, I kind of you wanna, yep. And it's so many different products and methods, and really special effects department is technically kind of the ones that do it, but we're all sort of involved in trying to figure out a process. And
yeah.
they're the realism. I would say that there's still work to be done in this world on coming up with really realistic, affordable artificial snow that, can be made within uh, it's a lot of experimentation
Yeah.
and there's a crispiness and a reflectivity to real snow that's very hard to get with every product and they're great teams and they're doing a really good job. It's a very tricky one. So we were super happy with what the team did here. We've learned a few things that sculpting, giving contour to the ground helps it feel
Hmm.
more real, putting a few twigs and leaves in to kind of break it up and give it some contrast. The last thing you want is to feel it's like the powder artificial snow of like a romance movie. You just
Right,
don't want that
right.
feel.
Right.
So yeah, it was a lot of work and it just worked out so well.
Oh,
We
yeah.
actually snowed up a huge portion of this forest outside Vancouver as well for all the running scenes. We moved trees
Oh,
around as
yeah.
well to use it a few times and get a lot of shoe leather out of it, but this was a big snow job.
I mean, the running through all the I was like, they must have done this in winter. This is crazy. Like,
Oh, wow. That's the best thing. Nothing better than thinking that, same for our cave set, by the
oh,
way, that we built out of foam.
yeah.
But nothing better than hearing that people think it's real.
Well,
That's
to me,
praise.
because of the depth of the snow and like how far you go back, and yeah, you can make like one run look like another run, but there's a lot of people running for like a good portion of that episode, and I was like, oh, they must have done this in winter, those poor actors.
You're a big user of the art. In season two, we had to actually order artificial snow in from other parts of the country. We
Oh,
use so much on our stage, and this is, I would say, probably a football field worth of area if you add it all
wow.
up, and then
Oh,
plus the
wow.
village, and then also we did the pit as well. Yeah, it
Right.
is a lot of material, a lot of work.
I do like to some of the Instagrams had the actors just like on there. I know it's a little blurry, but it's like they were enjoying their time on set with the snow. It looks like we could probably because it
Yeah.
was cold.
It was funny because it was kind of October and not really that cold, but I think they were also, to be honest, enjoying being in the snow, but outside because we did
Yeah.
so much stage work, which, there was a certain kind of interest to having the stage in season two as well for that feeling of like claustrophobia and being trapped in winter in the cabin. But I feel like they really enjoyed being outside in the wilderness this year.
Yeah, it's such a, I mean, how different 3 seasons can be with the design
Hmm.
of it is fantastic. And the opportunity to like progress this storyline through their design and how they're evolving in their environment is really great. It's a really great like just design wise. I love it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was a real joy. I feel like there's one designer for the pilot and then a different designer for season one and then me. And the previous two designers were amazing and did wonderful jobs. And it was really, I always wanted to honor their work as well while we
Yeah.
created also new, a show like this. Again, one of the joys of shows like this is that you're still reinventing the show every season. So for season
Yeah.
three, you're not just going into and we barely shot in any of the standing sets in season three. The Sadecki house, Thaisa's townhouse. We weren't
Right.
in there very much. We really were out in the world
Yeah.
between this and then some of the new other worlds that we created as well, like the hotels and Aussie's ice cream. And we just very much a road show, very each episode so much new, new to consider.
I know. I mean, I don't have that many slides of the modern or the present day
Mm.
sets, but I can tell like this, I mean this big hotel room that you did and
Yeah.
is the bar that they go to, is that a set or a location?
It's a location, and that one actually is a repeat of a bar that they shot in season one. It's in
Mhm.
Vancouver. Great bar, really great, bones to it, lots of texture.
Yeah,
Uh, that is real. And
that's
again, sometimes when you're doing, just a day of shooting, as you know, the frequently you'll go to a location. We did consider for the other sets, like the hotel, the kind of luxury hotel, and another hotel we did called the Jolly Hitcher, which was meant to be
Mhm.
more like a 90s throwback New Jersey hotel. We
Yeah.
did consider those as locations, but ultimately we ended up building both of those as sets for the same episode. And that was really fun. Two extremely different, you couldn't
Oh yeah.
get more different
When I
hotels in the same
when I
episode.
saw this come up, I'm like, oh my God, everyone was like, whew, we get to do a like high-end hotel suite,
Oh,
white and
yeah.
gold. Everybody just dive in because you're
Yeah. It was so much fun.
filming
And
all the
again,
time.
our brave DP, so Shasta, when I was talking to her originally, we talked about maybe, doing more of a wood sort of darker toned hotel, but that tread on what we did in for for Lottie's penthouse in 5. And also we just decided let's just go white. Let's just go
Yeah. Oh
super
yeah.
like just lush and cozy. So and it set it in such stark contrast to the Jolly Hitcher as well, which has got like
Yeah.
wood panel walls and it's kind of yellow and faded wallpaper.
There's something too within the story, like it's something pure, like it's white, it's new, we're relaxed, we're trying to relax here.
Yeah.
They can't get a relaxation day for their lives, but I mean,
Misty
trying.
shows up
Yeah,
and
they're trying.
that's so true. And again, it's a little poignant in a way because I think that the show does that. It kind of breaks your heart while giving you something,
Yeah,
beautiful, but also trying to, because of course it's for Van, right? Like Thais is trying to give Van this amazing, relaxing experience,
yeah.
but it will unravel being Yellowjackets.
What character do you like to design for the modern day?
Hmm. Actually, I would have to go with Shauna.
Hmm.
I think Shauna's house from season 1 set the tone that she's a little messy. Like she's got a lot of layers and she's trying to set up a certain facade, but she's also kind of unraveling. So I really enjoy in season 2, we did this chop shop where she's going to get her van back.
Right,
It's
yeah.
just so like unraveled and messy. It's just kind of a fascinating character. I mean, all the characters, to be honest. We also, I couldn't really pick one because they're all so interesting, and we always think about their inner narrative and how that projects onto not only the world they would make, but the world that we see through their eyes. For instance, Melissa was very interesting this season because she's a fake person. She's not even
Right,
herself.
right.
Her house, we made this very white, simple, kind of over decorated house where you can see that she's kind of curating her life. Like even her kids' drawings are a little perfect and
Hmm.
everything's a little perfect. She's got the sign that there's a blank spot on the wall. We're like, let's put the kitchen is the heart of the family over that
Yeah,
because of the irony, because of the heart, but also because she's pretending, but
yeah.
she's sort of fake, right? These are all just like performative gestures on her part. That was really fun too.
I liked Callie's room. I forget if we saw that before. I mean, maybe we did, but I feel like,
We did, yeah. It was a season 1 one, and I like it too because it's almost like I have 2 daughters and they outgrow their rooms really quickly.
yeah,
Like her room still felt like the room that had been put there for her when she was 12.
yeah. And I think with all the throwbacks and everything and how like things come around again, I sort of
Hmm.
felt that in her room of like, oh, look at how these trends come around again and like through generations and especially like when you think about like their rooms before they got in the crash in
Yeah.
season one, that was fun. And I felt like in in this season, I think every season, but I think in every season, the ability for you guys to throw back so well to
Hmm.
either like when they were young or like the modern day or like when they're here and threading them all together in design is really nice.
Yeah, I think the two timelines give us it's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of the things from the mid to late 90s are actually very trendy right now.
Yeah.
Fashion wise and style wise in some ways as well. So it's kind of interesting to look back. And when you do the research on the 90s, a lot of it's dated, but a lot of it really isn't as well. The world has changed a lot in terms of electronics and
Yeah.
fabrics, but there's also certain sort of style choices that it was very tricky to do the 90s.
It
For
is.
instance, the Jolly Hitcher, it's a modern hotel, but our showrunners had some hotels they were fond of in New Jersey from the 90s.
Mhm.
And so we did some research to try to remember, the kind of pattern on pattern and floral and certain things that like sort of set it as being a little lost in time,
Yeah.
go
90s are
back.
hard. I've done that. It's hard. It's hard to catch.
Yeah.
There was actually so many things going on. Like they
Yeah.
you could do the starkness, you could do the patterns and I don't know, there was so much going on in the 90s. It's hard to nail that style down without
Mhm.
it looking 80s or, too far back.
I
But
agree with you. I actually think that's a larger conversation. The 90s did have a lot of intersections of styles. And I think today is a bit like that too. So when we try really hard to find specific pieces that could only be 90s
yeah.
to help anchor it.
Yeah.
Certain things that like certain types of ruffle curtains and things that people just wouldn't do now, like a ruffled valance, that sort of thing, just to kind of make sure that it's anchored in
Yeah.
that time frame. And also, we're such thrifters now. Now
Yeah.
they just love thrifting. Like they'll just wear stuff from every decade. So it is, I feel like, a really interesting challenge to make sure it does when we're doing a 90s set, like the 90s classroom. Really be careful to make sure things are rooted in what could have been possible then and what would be there then.
What do you how did the intertwining with costumes through this? Because I know, you're making everything, but like this scene with them, with
Hmm.
all of the greenery around them and everything. Is there, I'm sure, a lot of interaction between costumes and yourself, but is it like, hey, they wouldn't have that many of this for you to like they wouldn't have these like we all have to share the reality kind of what they had on the plane. Like
Hmm.
I always feel like that, like lending to each other through during the different thing or props or everything, like the bigger discussion of that.
Yeah, that was a really interesting. I mean, Marie is just the most fabulous costume designer, and she's such a thinker and a deep thinker as well. So she, of course, I think her costumes in the pilot were a large part of the visual excitement that the show established
Hmm.
from the outset. It was like, oh my, wow, those are wild. And she was really thoughtful about combining things like sports jerseys and furs and,
Right.
buckles from the airplane seatbelts and, just really thought it through. And then the hair, I don't, I'm not sure if that was her pitch originally, but I feel like she established this fascinating cultural endpoint, in the flash forward in the pilot that we were early on. So we had a fabulous different costume designer in season two. So Marie was new to me for season three.
Mhm.
And early on, we had a fantastic conversation about culture and where were they going to get to. And I feel we were intrinsically intertwined for this season in terms of what you mentioned, which is kind of like the scale and the volume of pieces that they could have used from the plane. For instance, she's those capes that you showed in the ceremony where they let the lanterns go. Those are made from the seat of the plane leather sort of turned inside out.
Hmm.
And you can see and there's some animal, is it sort of different pieces that they could have found or used or cannibalized, as it were, from the plane. We did think about that. And when we went back to the plane later in the season, we made sure that we showed that the seats had been ripped apart and that they had taken, every piece that we established in the town, like the wires that were used to tie some of the twigs together. We made sure when we went back to the plane that you showed the wires had been pulled out and the panels had been pulled off and the seats had been cannibalized, as it were, which is fun in the service of making a spooky atmosphere, but also that kind of realism of scale of what you can accomplish. So we did talk a lot with costumes and props and make the real goal and challenge was to make sure that we had a culture that they had been resourceful and scavenging and using pieces they found and creating pieces, but we never wanted to have more than they could have actually had. So there were some
Right.
comments about, okay, so we've got a couple candles on set here. We can't have this many because I feel like they couldn't have salvaged that many. There was definitely some deep conversations among all of our artistic departments and our showrunners and writers and directors about all of that.
Yeah, and I think you guys nail it. Like I don't ever think like that's unrealistic. I think that with the timing that they've been there and the resources that they have, it all looks achievable. Like, I mean, it's a
Oh,
lot of
thank
work,
you.
but
That's good to
it's a
hear.
lot of work, but I think that they could do it. Like these girls are pretty headstrong. I think they just
Oh,
characters,
yeah.
yeah.
They're determined. And that's good to hear because I do feel that there was moments where I was like, it's quite stark. Like the village really doesn't have a lot of smalls, decorations fairly, but then it's like, oh, that's just the way it's going to be. Every piece needs to be precious.
Yeah. I mean, as a decorator, like you're talking about like technology and everything before, like look at our desk dressing now. You have like
Hmm.
you usually have a laptop. You don't have phones anymore, really. But people don't
Hmm.
even have phones. There's no paperwork. So
Yeah.
it's like a lamp and like maybe some judges. Maybe you still have, tape. Why do you even have tape? Like I
Yeah.
questioned that the other day.
True.
I'm like, why do we have tape? Why do I have a
Yep.
tape dispenser anymore? Nobody's taping shit. Like,
Nope.
but it looks pretty. But desk dressing to me has just gone down so much, especially when you're doing something a little modern. It's like, oh,
That's
put
a
a
good point.
rock. Let's put a rock on here and like a little
People
table.
stapling anymore. Like that is
No.
true. And that's one good kind of example of what does distinguish the 90s from now is they had a lot of paraphernalia. They
Yeah.
had payphones still, they
Still
had
had
things in the
Rolodex. You
world.
still, you
Yeah.
still had that going on. So
Yeah.
when I
Address
see,
books.
yeah, so when I see like I have it, I don't know, I have it somewhere. Like there's a table with some dressing on it. I think it's like over here.
Hmm.
The camp. It's like, well,
Yep.
that's their salvage table. Like that's all they got. Like this is it.
Yep.
Like,
That's it. That's, I think, their candle making table that
right.
the biggest fun really on the village was thinking about what do they do day by day? Okay, so we had an area where they're like,
Right.
they're utilizing, actually, speaking of costumes, there was this fabulous detail that um, Marie did on Van's jacket that's got the leather on top from the airplane seats, and then it has these like tassels of fabric in multicolors. And it's
Hmm.
just really kind of fun and textured. So we later in the season when Misty was, we had this kind of shift where we went from summer to early fall and we added blankets to the doorways. And, Akila's blanket, she'd sort of drawn some flowers on it and they found ways to decorate and make their space their own. And so Misty had these kinds of fabrics, which I found shot really beautifully. The scene where they reshot her sort of like smile towards the end of the season is
Yeah.
standing with that towards that as
Like
a
oh.
background. It's such a beautiful texture and material. But that definitely was from Marie's costume, where we're like, they're going to use the same techniques to create the soft fabrics to keep themselves warm in the winter, and their doorways need to tie into what they're doing with their clothes as well. Like you could literally see someone, you hang up a blanket in your doorway and then you wear it the next day and you
Yeah.
put the belt around yourself from the
You
airplane
have
to
to
the
multi-use everything. I mean, you have to find
Mhm.
uses for things and multi-use everything for the season.
Yeah.
How big was your greens budget? No. I mean,
I don't even know. I'd be scared to find our greens. I really full kudos. I mean,
I
full
mean, you had
kudos
a
to
whole
our
little
greens department.
farm there too this season, which was great. A little, they
Oh
started
yeah.
things and chickens and
Yeah, we had so much greens, and to the point where the location we were, greens was also involved in like creating areas for the set. And then originally we had a bunch of scouts for where to put the village. Originally there was this kind of like circular opening in the trees, and we're like, man, it could be there, but it wasn't as like exciting. And then we found this location that just down the hill and kind of awkward to get to. But luckily, we had brave producers who were willing to say, oh, you know what, it's going to be a slightly tricky cart roll, but we'll get used to it. And we built kind of a little gravel road and we built a bridge to get to it. So these all involved the greens department. And then we just bushwhacked this site that was filled with brambles, kind of like 4 feet.
wow.
So you just sort of stood there and you tried to imagine it. But what was amazing was a little peninsula with a stream that runs around it. It was the
Oh,
perfect size to create a not too big village that had a kind of centrality because we knew we wanted it to be a circle with the fire pit in the center. The kitchen is your meeting place. And it was amazing. But our greens department, it was a huge show. Like everything in this village is, our
yeah.
conversations about you can't, let's not cut the twig, you need to break
Yeah.
it on your knee. And they have some axes, but there's only one, like all these conversations about how did they make it, which was definitely exploratory.
And making it look lived in, like look, this is the path that runs, and like, there's still some grass around, but they're walking around this place all the time, and there's mud and grass growth around the
Mhm.
huts to show that they've been there a little bit through a season. And no, it's really kudos to the greens department on this too, because that's a big job.
It's a big job, and I would say what you mentioned about the mud and so on, that was a real challenge. And keeping the kind of because we had to kind of raise the landscape and then put the village in, my one concern was always making sure it didn't feel too blank. So we
Mm,
put tufts of grass in and tried to make it grow, but like leave pathways where they would have been walking.
yeah.
That was difficult. I think if I have one thing that I found to be the tricky thing that when I would go to set early would be just making sure that it didn't feel like just blank and brown, like get some leaves in there, so there was some texture to the floor of the village, as it were. And then nature took over
I
where
mean,
we were walking,
did you
with
come
the
in
huts.
almost every morning? There was like morning dew on everything, or
Oh
like,
yeah. It was
Yeah.
beautiful. There's like it's just like lovely sitting there sometimes. Just to go there early and find a stump
Oh,
to sit on and just like, see the sun come up is absolutely stunning. And nature really did take over too. We just kind of planted the seed as it were and let it go because we put some grass seeds in and they grew. But what we didn't expect in a kind of freaky Logan's Runway is I always thought like these apocalypse movies where, people have left the city for 10 years and it's completely overgrown with vines. I'm
yeah.
like, yeah, that's a little bit of the lean in because it looks cool. But actually, those huts, like grass grew, like everything grew so much in one season. Like the grass was like 3 feet high in places, and the
Wow.
huts completely grew over. And without tending, nature really takes over really quickly. And we just let it go. We
Yeah.
just for the realism. We're like, oh, let's just see what happens. Whatever it is, it's gonna be good.
Oh, that's
So it's
great.
fun.
Now, do you have do you have these standing sets, or did you just take everything down?
No, no. So we're it's still standing.
Oh, that's good.
I assume I'm allowed to say that. I don't know. If I'm
Wait
not,
till
we'll
I
get out of
mean,
the end of the podcast. But yeah,
I can't wait to see like or for
I
you
kind
to see what the
I
growth
kind
is
of
when you go back. I mean,
Yeah, no, that's a fingers crossed. There's has not been an official pickup yet, but I think we're all hoping and we all love our show and love the story. So we'd love
oh,
to go back and I miss the village. Like it really does feel you start to get very attached to these places, when you work
yeah.
on them and it's so amazing to see the cast come in and make it their own. And yeah, I just kind of miss just going there and opening set and doing whatever we're doing for the day there.
I mean, I hope it's I don't think that was the ending, but I because I'm a fan, but where would you like to see this evolve to? Or like what are there things for you that you would like to design for these characters?
I would love to see something that I think I can say because the showrunners have mentioned it in interviews. I know nothing, like this is not insider intel, but I would love to see what happened when they come back. Like you
Yeah.
mentioned their bedrooms in the 90s. I would love to see what happens when you're just a kid, just going on a plane to go to a soccer tournament, and then you come home 2+ years later, is it 19 months? Trying to remember exactly how long they're out there, but you come back and you're a completely different person. You're different and you're
How many of the
primal.
parents like kept the rooms and which parents
Yeah.
didn't? Like
Yeah.
that's an even harder blow of like they turned it into an office. They like
Oh,
but
yeah.
understandable, they thought I was dead. I don't know. That's either way, it's like crazy.
Well, I think that's the interesting scene when they circle Hannah when they've got her tied up in the double airplane chair and they're like, "Are people still looking for us?" And she's like, "No." And that's a sad moment for them to
Yeah.
realize like life kind of has moved forward. So it's like they're the people that have gone in a time capsule or coming back to a world that makes you can't step back into where you were when you just left. Things have changed. And there's so many things about the way societies run that I think wouldn't make sense to them anymore, that they would just cut to the chase. Like they just wouldn't
Yeah.
feel, like you're gonna come back and worry about styles.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna
Yeah.
worry about what color is it trendy this year? Or who are they when they come back? And how has each one been affected by their trauma there and the lies that they're holding inside themselves? I think that'd be super interesting to explore that.
I think the casting on the show is fantastic on both on the young and the older age.
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic. I love Christina Ricci and I love Juliette Lewis. I think that's fantastic. Did you know who the queen was? Like,
No, actually, I did not. Although I think it's sometimes those sort of interesting stories where there's breadcrumbs left and you don't see the path when you're walking on it, but you look back and you're like, of course, I should have seen that. I
yeah,
mean, really fascinating conversation I had with Bart and Ashley and Jonathan at the beginning of the season was about getting to the pit at the end. We knew
Mhm.
we were going to get to the pit at the end in this iconic scene. We also were not on Mammoth Mountain. We're on a relatively flat forest in Vancouver, BC, and we knew it was going to likely be artificial snow. So this, of course, is a somewhat interesting challenge to think, okay, we're going to try to recreate bits of something that was filmed in real snow in winter in a mountain, and we're not that. So we knew that we were going to be dovetailing into the pilot. But an interesting conversation was to do with Shauna and her diary and a sense of this was something more that I was asking, but are we recreating exactly what we saw in the pilot, or are we creating a version of it? And in a
Reversion.
funny
Yeah.
way, we did. We were creating kind of a larger, more objective focus versus this. The conversation was that, as Sean, I think, mentions in episode 10 in season 3, like, what are real stories? Like, how does our memory distort it? Why is it so hard to remember? And
Yeah.
that is, your memory is like that. I was reading a little bit about memory recently that our memory is like, we remember the last time we remembered it, not the actual thing. It's like a game of
Yeah.
telephone with yourself,
I
you
remember
know?
shit, really. It's like
Yeah.
photograph. I think one thing in modern day, sidebar, that will help us with memory is all the pictures we take now.
Oh,
I
it's
think,
so crazy, isn't it, that you remember like that picture more
yeah,
than you remember being in the moment. So
yeah,
it's like the diary and these kinds of like their memories are filtered through what they want to remember, what they don't want to remember, and this kind of like sort of almost simplification that happens with memory sometimes. You just go right to the main point, you forget all this static. So I think that was obviously music to my ears too, because we're never going to be able to recreate the exact. We did bring in trees of the same species, and we were so careful and tried very hard. But of course, like I said, we're in Vancouver, we're using artificial snow. We're not on a mountain in winter. So, full kudos to the team, but it was, intersected very amazingly with the editing as well.
yeah.
But that feeling of, I think it'd be interesting to continue to explore in the show what you chose to remember versus the reality, and how is that affecting you now as well as like with Melissa. Like Melissa's been trying to, I think, create some sort of curated perfect life, but now that's all ripped apart. So
Right.
it'd be interesting to see things continue to kind of get ripped apart.
It's such a great like story because you have two versions of this life that they led, like this outdoor life and their modern life. And getting
Mhm.
to design for both of them is really and decorate. I'm sure your decorators thrilled too to be able to like develop these characters younger and older. Like it's
Mhm.
that's something like sometimes you do a flashback or whatever, but when you have a whole series of developing characters at different ages, that's amazing. That's
Yeah, I
to
think it
me,
is. We have
that's fun.
super talented decorators, Ida Foyle for season 3 and Mark Lane did season 2. Both amazing, very thoughtful decorators. I think these types of shows, like we were speaking about earlier, just they appeal to someone who really wants to do the research and wants to think about it. And then add the extra thing you didn't expect. What I've loved about these types of projects is, they're never one note. There's so
Right.
many layers going on at once. Misty's bedroom, for instance, that we did in season 3.
Hmm.
Misty's an interesting and complex character,
Missy's
So what
great.
posters does she have? Isn't she great? Oh, I love Misty. I have a Misty Funko Pop. I also have a
Yeah,
Coach Ben Funko Pop, which Steven Kruger signed
that's
for my
awesome.
kids. Air quotes, which is awesome.
That's awesome.
Two of my favorite characters.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's
No
great.
favorites, but highlights.
Yeah. I always have a favorite character, I feel like, because I don't know, either you relate to them or you hate them or you're like interested in their story more. I think you always pick a favorite. At
I
least
feel
I'm.
like there's a character too, like for when Coach Ben, oh, so sorry about his demise, but
Yeah,
he
really.
was kind of the person who was still the outsider, kind of like our eyes interpreting their behavior and let
Right.
us know like the degree to which the needle was shifting. And when he's gone, they sort of that goes from the
Yeah.
story,
I
you know.
I could never have imagined how this season would have gone, and I think the design of it really pushes the story forward and showing how determined they are to make it work there. Like, and when they
Yeah,
like
that's what
you're
we
not
got the
going
artistic
anywhere.
license.
It's
Yeah.
pretty much like, yeah, you don't have to leave. Like you can stay. We can stay here, which is crazy, but
That was
they
the
believe
feeling
it.
is like once you leave the plane and once you leave the cabin, these are all steps of making it more your own. You go from like the plane, which is the like you'll stay there for a few days, nobody shows up. You go to the cabin, which is inhabiting another space, but then that kind of gets burned down, which is like the carpet, the rug being pulled
Yeah.
out from underneath them and forcing them to kind of mature into being people who are going to live and survive in the wilderness. So then yeah, this town, like I mean, the village that they make, they could potentially be where they live the rest of their lives. So it changes the narrative to making it your own, taking the key notes from the costumes where they've just made it their own. Like they're into their own culture now. They have their own visual language. There's meaning to what they're doing.
Where
Yeah.
did you shoot the last shot when she's up on the cliff?
Oh, that was actually in a mountain in Vancouver.
So
Very
beautiful.
small crew went up in a helicopter for that. I love that scene. The
Really.
music, the needle drop is so appropriate too.
Music,
Um,
everything. It's perfect.
yeah.
And the
And Natalie
determination to get
too.
up there and like make that call. Like it's such a
Yeah,
great ending.
it is real, which is great. We had those conversations you have about, I do respect and appreciate that the show will lean into the real and the scope as much as possible. So the conversations that do happen about, do you want to shoot it green screen or blue screen? Do you want to
Right.
do a little set? And we went through all those, but ultimately the only way to do it is to pick your battles and make it as real as possible for such important scenes like that. So they
Yeah.
got the scale and the scope and the realism. And yeah, go Natalie, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Poor Natalie. Well, thank you. I've
Thank
taken up
you.
a beautiful hour of your Sunday, but thank you so much. I love the work. I hope it gets recognized because it's a lot of work shooting outside the whole time. And
Yeah.
how long did you shoot? How long are your episodes?
The episodes are 12 days, but there's some overlap.
Oh,
One
yeah.
nice thing about the show, I think for the ADs is that the two timelines are separate, which helps them a bit to keep
Oh,
the
nice.
scheduling of the actors. So 12 days, but maybe a couple of overlap days depending on the episode. So maybe 10 linearly.
Nice.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Time. It's not,
Yeah.
doesn't seem too compact, which is like what I feel like a lot of people are running into, myself included. Like, oh, no,
Yeah,
smaller.
we do good support and resources to try to lean in and make the show as carefully as possible to craft the show. Just a fantastic team too. I just want to give kudos to everyone that worked in our prep departments. Prep is often
Yeah.
I'm so glad to see more narrative and conversation about prep too. It's such a huge part of filmmaking, and we
My
don't
favorite
always know.
part.
Yeah, there's so much like passion and people throw so much of themselves. I mean, I feel like every single person, as you know, every single person is important to the creation of the show, and everyone has amazing ideas. So it's nice to see that be honored as